Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Living with XXY podcast series. I'm your host, Ryan Briganti. So today's podcast is all about fertility, and we're starting a new series to help spread more awareness about male infertility within our community, but also have the guys out there who have been diagnosed with Klinefelter syndrome share their experience on what it's like to become a father. And so today I have Jared Pike from Arizona on the other line. What's going on, Jared?
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well, man. So, let's talk a little bit about when you were diagnosed, and kind of how you got diagnosed, and then we'll kind of lead into your fertility journey.
Yeah. So, well, my diagnosis is part of my fertility journey, right? So I wasn't diagnosed until 2000, officially 2014. I took my karyotype in 2013, and then beginning of January, I received my diagnosis of Klinefelter's, and it was a little disheartening at the time to find out hey, I can never have kids naturally, right? Um, but there are other aspects of it that I'd find out later on from that, of different things that we could do to have a family, right? Um, my wife has always wanted to do foster care, but knew that, when we got married, that it was important for me that we try and have kids naturally first before proceeding with foster care. And but that wasn't in the cards. That wasn't the direction that was planned out for us. So my wife and I were married in 2008. And we had gone through several doctors and things, and had people say, oh, you need to have a better sleep schedule, or oh, you need to change your diet, that's what's affecting this, or but nobody ever said well, you don't have a sperm count because you probably have something chromosomal or within your DNA that's going on, right? So after 5 years of trying to have kids and being unsuccessful, I was like, you know what? I need to go and see a specialist, right? And so I got a referral from my doctor to go and see a specialist, and he was just going to have me go through the same test. And I was like, look, dude, I can show you 5 years worth, twice a year, of all these tests you're having me do. None of those are going to work. None of that's going to happen. And he's like, all right, well, let's do a karyotype. Let's just do this, right? And I was like, karyotype? What's that? So I went home and looked up a karyotype, and it was like, I don't have any of these things, right? I don't have, the first thing, of course, that always pops up is Down syndrome. You look up a karyotype, oh, Down syndrome, this is how they find out. And it's like, well, why would I have this done? That doesn't make any sense. But then after getting it, it's like, oh, well, this is why, right? I do have a differentiation in my chromosomes that's preventing this from happening naturally. So after receiving that diagnosis, we looked at donors and what that would detail. And my older brother, agreed to be our donor and go that route. And so we tried 3 rounds of IUI, which is the turkey baster method. And that's the best way to describe what it is, right?
Definitely.
And so we, supporting my wife the whole way through this, and that didn't work out. And so we said, well, before we can do IVF, let's go ahead and go through become foster parents. And so we took the course in Arizona. Generally it's a 6-week course. Ours was 10 weeks because we had one of the nights we met was Memorial Day So that was canceled. So we had to meet another week for that class. And then we had the 4th of July in there too. And so that we had to meet another week because that fell on a day that we would be meeting. And so we did a 10-week course instead of a 6-week course, or 8-week. Instead of an 8-week, we did a 10-week course. And it just talked about all the different rules and regulations we'd have to go through. And in the certification, storing your medicine all in one cabinet, or making sure you have locks on your cabinet where you store chemicals, looking at who lives in your area, different offenders that are in your area, what's your background check, what's the background check on your parents, who are your siblings, and all of the adults in the house, have your dogs ever bit anybody, making sure you stay up on their shots and things like that too. And then the physical health of you guys too plays into it. And then part of that of becoming a foster parent, I decided that if I'm going to be bringing kids into my home that are experiencing trauma and are experiencing different things too, and that this isn't a way to overcome my infertility though too. This isn't, foster care isn't the resolve to my infertility, but it's a way that I can help my community, right? The ultimate goal of foster care isn't for me to adopt kids. It's for me to reunify them with their family, right? And so my family isn't a normal family structure, isn't this nuclear family that I have, but rather it's my community. That's my family now. And so now we've had 8 foster children. We have 1 current case. We've adopted 1. And then there are 6 others that have reunified, if not with one of their parents or both of their parents, but have reunified with other family. Whether it's an aunt and an uncle, or a grandparent, or somebody that they've reunified with their family, and now we're a part of that family.
When
And
you,
although,
oh, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
So although we have adopted 1, that adoption wasn't out of like a case that we were working. That was our caseworker came to us and said, look, here's this family that isn't able to adopt this little girl like they had planned. Would you be interested in adopting her? And so we went through the process of meeting that family and this little girl, and then going through and being like, yeah, we'd like to adopt her,
Can
So
you, I mean, like it's almost that your mentality of thinking about, this isn't to grieve over my diagnosis, and then to also like think about community. That's huge, and that's incredible. What were some of those feelings that you had when you got diagnosed, and after 5 years of trying, and the doctor's constantly telling you like, come back, this, that, go, it's this or it's that. Did you like change your diet? Did there things that you
yeah,
did? And then once you got the diagnosis, like, can you explain those emotions?
yeah. So it was hard, right? Like, it sucks having to go to all of those appointments to go to the doctors of like, what are they going to do, right? What's the change going to be? Because nothing that I'm doing, sure, I'll eat healthier, I won't eat out as much. Like the time I worked security, right? Like, oh, okay. And then I started working a graveyard shift. Oh, it's your sleep pattern. Well, that I can understand a little bit. That does affect my health. And so like, okay, let me try and find a new job to where I'm not, working a graveyard shift. But there are other things of like, well, if we just take this blood sample at a different time in your life, or if we, try again to count your sperm. Okay, so what's going to change? Like the last 3 doctors all said I don't have a sperm count. Like what's going to change in there if I change my diet? They're magically going to appear. Like, how is this going to work out? it was finally one of the doctors that said, have you ever gone to, an endocrinologist and had things checked out? And it was like, no, like, why would I need to? Yeah, I mean, it takes two to tango. So yeah, I should probably go to an endocrinologist and get checked out. And I wish I had one with better bedside manner, um, and I won't focus on that. But after receiving that diagnosis, and there wasn't much information given, he was just like, "Yep, oh, you have 47 chromosomes. It's called Klinefelter syndrome, and you can't have kids." And that sucked. Like that was a devastating blow, and I was pretty depressed for a couple weeks or a month or two, and of just like trying to wrap my head around what I've been diagnosed with, and there not being, I mean, it's 9 years ago now that receiving this diagnosis of like there not being any positive information on it, right? And that's what this is about, is changing that to positive information, of, yeah, while I couldn't have kids, it doesn't mean that I can't be a father. It doesn't mean that there aren't other options available to us to pursue, to have kids. With it, we just need a little more a medical intervention in order to have that. But if that's the path that you so choose, for my wife and I, that door's not closed yet. We still have one more opportunity to pursue IVF, but it's 20 grand. So that's that's a saving up for it, right? But in the meantime, we do foster care, and we help strengthen other households and families that we can. And then we have our daughter that we adopted, and it's been coming up here. It's going to be 3 years since we adopted her. So,
is there anything that helped you cope with the anger, the frustration, the unknown of the diagnosis? And how long was that grieving period where you guys were trying for kids, you got your diagnosis, and then when did you realize, like, when did you get over the grieving? When did your wife say, like, okay, let's foster, or let's go down this IUI path? Like, was it
well,
instantaneously?
for me, like, I was the push behind, let's try the IUI, right? She was like, foster care, do it. Like, let's do this. This is what we need to do. And I was just like, I'm not ready for that, right? She saw in me that I was still grieving this loss, and that IUI to me was like, this is right, this IVF, this IUI, this fertility path of medical intervention is the way that we need to go, because this is how we have a family now, right? Um, this child isn't going to have the same genome structure as me, but it'll be related to me. And so that's a better option than doing an unknown genome, right? And having that, we know a lot of adult adoptees, and we know a lot of adults from that realm that don't know who their father or who their mother is, or both parents, because of the option that their parents opted for, right? And so there's a lot within that community of victimization, or of hatred, because of this process of those sealed records, or of different things that happen within that medical intervention community, that isn't correct or isn't right, but there isn't any laws stopping those things from happening. So for me, I think, knowing what I know now, I probably would have just jumped feet first into foster care and gone that route, but I needed that process to grieve. And so that was probably 6 months to a year of like really going through that. But at the same time, I didn't let it stop me from finding things out too, right? Like in that process of grieving, I, got online to find things out, and which isn't good because there's a lot of misinformation on Klinefelters online, right? And so I turned to Facebook and I turned to other things. I found Living with XXY. I found other XXY, groups. I I got on Google Scholar and I, set my parameters to 2005 and newer, right? So I could find newer information and not researches from the 70s and the 80s where there isn't a lot of, that's all old information. That's nothing, you know, um, especially within the medical community. So I didn't necessarily let the depression or that, anxiety of that end of that route for me stop me. But that I also used it to find more out and um, to learn how to advocate for myself within this journey as well.
I mean, that's 6 months to a year to grieve, and your wife giving you that time is extremely important. And I do know that when you're trying, especially trying for 5 years, there might be this by either the guy or the wife, there might be this desire to like just let's push for kids right away. But it's really incredible that your wife allowed or gave you the time and understood that you needed that time. And then during that time of anger and grief and all the emotions that you were experiencing in the beginning, you started to learn more about this condition. You were like, well, what is this? What is it that affects me of this? Like, how can I? And then you're getting diagnosed later on in life. So you've lived your early years of your life without even knowing. And then, so that must have been like an eye-opening experience, also reading all the old and outdated information and um, just that whole process for you. I mean,
Well, and it finding out also made things make sense too, right? Looking at my childhood, looking how I responded to things versus how my siblings responded to things. I'm number 4 of 9, right? I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers. So there's a lot to compare myself with as far as how my siblings did things, or how, whether they were older, whether they were younger, and being on that cusp of that middle child of, well, this is how they do it, so let me try to do it this way. And then seeing like my younger siblings do something different, like, oh, maybe I should try it this way instead, and see too. So having that, and then just having, accepting parents of like, well, okay, so you have this. Is there, could we have found out? That was something that hurt my mom a lot, was that, we could have found out when you were 14, but price wise, it wasn't affordable for us. You know, at 14, I grew 6 inches one summer, and so I went through, like my joints hurt, my like everything, right? And so they went through a bunch of stuff and tests, and the last thing that they could try was to have a karyotype done, but they were looking at a couple grand at the time. In the 90s, like, yeah, you can pay a couple grand to have this done because insurance isn't going to cover it, and we may or may not find anything in there. And so my mom kind of felt that heartache of like, we could have known, and this would have been able to be, have resolved sooner, right? Instead of having you suffer through this time. But really, I just look at it and say, well, you did everything for me that you could, and that's what matters, right? It's not on you that we didn't find out about it until now. you did what you could do and you did what you could afford. And I only paid $700 to, have this done. Whereas I look at, our IUIs or, our first IVF and say, yeah, I paid 15 grand to, you know, try and have a baby through IVF while we were doing foster care and it didn't work. Like, that's 15 grand in the hole. Right. But the fact of like, I am helping kids and be a father to them as much as I can, and knowing that they hold on to that, right? Knowing that I talk with a young man who's in his, he's in his 20s now. And he comes to me because, I did foster his son, and he knows that he can count on me to give him unbiased information, right? It's not parental information, but here's a mentor in my life that is helping me. And I know he's a good person because he didn't try and take my kid away from me, even though he probably could have and probably would have been successful at it too, right? Because he wasn't in a good spot in his life and his relationship at that time, right? But we knew that his life with his son was important, and that his son needed to be reunified with his dad because that relationship is valuable, is important. And that's something that we value too in our lives and in our family structure. And so now he and I are great friends, and I'm able to mentor him, and we check in with each other every day or every couple of days. We have friends that live in, a couple hours away from us now, and share their life afterwards too. And my wife and this lady are really good friends, and share updates on how their daughter is doing, who's close to the same age as our daughter. And then now they have another little girl, and their family is prospering because of the help that we were able to give them. And that gives me joy, right? That gives me success as a dad, as an individual, that I helped father this child and helped mentor this couple so that they could get their child back and that they could have, success as a family.
What what helped you with acceptance? Like, what helped you through your grieving process and then getting to that point where you were ready, and not only the acceptance aspect, but also, a lot of men that are being diagnosed exactly like you are
Yeah.
have this when they do donor sperm or when they do adoption, they are like, well, it doesn't feel like my child. Like, how did that, when did that switch for you?
Um, it's a good question. You can look at them having to have the same genome structure as you, to have that part of your DNA in order to be considered a dad. But you don't have to, right? Like having the diagnosis, and knowing that say it. Just knowing that the individual looks up to you and that you're caring for them, right? You're instilling your principles and your thoughts, and you're teaching them, right? You're helping them learn and you're helping them grow, right? That mentorship is also what parenting is. Being a dad is being a mentor. You don't have to have the same DNA, the same genome structure as an individual in order for them to consider you their dad, right? I mean, we look at step parents, right? And, you could have a stepdad, you could have a stepmom, but call them your dad all the time and be like, you kind of don't look like your dad. And like, well, they're not my bio dad. But that individual is my dad because he raised me. He taught me how a man should act. He took me out on dates. He, did these things with me and he taught me how to do things, right? He was a father. He was an individual who raised me, who was there for me. That's my father, right? You don't need to have, it's nice. It would be nice. It would be lovely to have a kid that has my DNA structure, that came from me. But I look at it now and I say that's a boomer way of thinking, right? I mean, if we use that terminology from today, right? That's the 1950s speaking to us of like, well, they didn't come from you, so they're not yours. Well, that's a bunch of BS, dude. Like, that's not what it is anymore, right? And that line of thinking isn't healthy. That only leads to further darker thoughts and just spirals you downward. It doesn't lead to positive places. That mindset change for me took a while, right? Took me a while to see it. Took me a while to be able to process that. But in that time frame, I was working on becoming a police officer and working security and doing different things. And after my diagnosis, it was like, I don't need to be a police officer. I need to be a teacher. If I'm going to do foster care, then I need to be a special education teacher so that I know how to deal with the trauma that these kids are coming into my home with. I need to know how to not only educate the kid coming into my home, but how to educate their parents on how to better take care of themselves too, and how to teach the child within their home.
So this became a career path switch for you? Like,
Yeah.
becoming a foster parent all of a sudden changed your entire career and your perspective of like
everything. It changed. The diagnosis didn't just change me and like how I thought about myself, but it changed my whole life. And if I was going to make that change, then it had to be done in a positive way, right? If I'm going to accept myself, accept this part of me that I've never known, right? So like I've known it, like I know who I am, but I've never known that inner core structure part of me. Like, why do I carry my weight this way? Why am I 6'6" when my dad is 5'10", 5'11", when my, mom is shorter, when my tallest brother now is, I think he might be 6'1", right? When everybody is heads and shoulders shorter than me, right? Why am I so tall? Why, I wear a size 11 shoe and I'm 6'6". That doesn't go hand in hand together. Like, what? Why is that way, right? That's just how I was built for a long time. That's what, it's just the way that you are. There is no explanation of it. But having that explanation now of like, oh yeah, I have 47 chromosomes. It's XXY. It's called Klinefelter syndrome. This is, my body structure. Most guys carry their weight like this, or they do these things. But that also, while it's who I am, there's so much more to me also. And so let's change that so that I'm a positive impact, not just only on myself, but my
too. Oh, it's so refreshing to hear perspective from another individual in our community that has taken their experience. I think like hardship, right? Like I was bullied an extreme amount growing up, and I wasn't bullied because of XXY, but I was taller than everyone and I had a gap in between my teeth. The girls thought I was cute, but I had no clue. And so,
that's the hardest, like figuring that out. Like, oh yeah, you're, meeting up with them. Oh, you're still so as handsome as you were before. And it was like, wait, you thought I was cute? Yeah, you didn't know that? Oh, geez.
Oh, there's so many of those moments. But like taking those hardships that we had in our lives and not letting the hardship defeat us and learning from it and figuring out how is this hardship going to excel me forward in my life to where it will prepare me for something that, like, in the future, that I don't need. Like, if I didn't have that hardship, I would never be prepared for it. And
Right.
your diagnosis could have, it did lead you down a dark path for a little while, and you know,
Right.
you have to grieve, and everyone is going to grieve differently. So your wife's going to grieve differently than you are.
Right.
And the fact that you needed that 6 months to a year and you were able to overcome it, and then how it, like, the thought process and the perspective switch of it changed your entire career, it changed your life. And when you speak about it changed your life, you're not like, oh, woe is me, like it changed my life in a negative way. Like, you didn't allow the negativity to, like, seep into all those holes that are there, and you started patching up all the holes on the ship that had all the holes, and instead of
Yeah.
sinking, you started to become you started to float again.
Yeah, and that's, and I mean, I still struggle with things. Still, there's things that still bother me in life that's related to Kleinfelters, but that, I have to just remind myself of, like, no, like, you can fix this, you can change this. There are, I look to some of those guys that are bodybuilders and that, are like, hey, I achieved a six pack, and I'm like, okay, I know that it's possible for us to achieve a six pack. Okay, I can, you know, if I want to do that, if that's something that's important to me, that I can achieve that. It's just going to be more work than it takes my brothers to achieve a six pack, right? It's going to take me a lot longer to do those things, but it is possible. It is possible to become a dad. It is possible to become that father figure that you want to be. You just need that mindset change. And that is hard. Having there's in education, we call it a growth mindset. And I know outside of education too, that they call it that growth mindset. And there's books, like looking at my bookshelf, trying to think where it is, but there's a book on it, on growth mindset. And I teach it in my classrooms, on having that change, and not looking at yourself of woe is me, but this is what I want to do to have that change. And adopting my daughter, um, in doing that, it changed how we do foster care a little bit, because we want to keep a an age, where she's the oldest. So she being 4 years old, we don't want to bring in anybody that's older than her. We want to keep her the older child. And so, it's 3 and younger, or 4 and younger is the age that we look at bringing kids in, into our home. And at some point, we'd love to have, older kids in our home, because that is a need within the foster system, of just being able to have older kids in the home. Most older kids within the foster system are in group homes, and it's not good situations for them. you know I see it within teaching, and within my school, and it's heartbreaking to, um for them to be in those situations. And so I try and be that positive influence of, like, look, I know what you're going through. I'm a foster parent. You can come into my room and talk with me about your case. You can come in and talk with me about your day, whatever it is you want to discuss, we can discuss it. If you need help contacting your case manager, I can help you do that. If you need help with this, I can do that and help you provide those things outside of your group home or outside of your foster placement. Um, and just be that mentor to them outside of there. And it's good. It brings joy to my life, knowing that I'm helping them. Um, I, um,
You're a special person, man.
it takes a lot to get to that point, and we've had our ups and our downs with the system, and but at the same time, it's, yeah, it's a government run thing. It's not going to be perfect, right? Um, but just knowing that I am helping to for somebody else to keep their family, for somebody else to become a better dad, to become a better mom, um, or for them to go to family to be able to have that family connection is important.
I mean, not only are you making a difference within your community and the foster care community, but you're also sharing your story about Klinefelter syndrome and, male infertility is
Yeah,
a part of Klinefelter syndrome. So it's like there's multiple things within the Klinefelter or the XXY diagnosis that need male infertility in general needs its own awareness, its own thing that is
yeah.
outside of the
Well,
XXY community.
and I mean, you and I have talked about, like I could go and have a micro tease done, but I decided, oh, I think it was 2 years ago, I decided that that's not the route that I want to take. And closing that door, um, on that chapter, that was a big thing for me, of deciding of just emotional, should I do that? Should I close this door, or should I go and have a micro tease done? Right. And deciding, foster care is the way for us for right now. We do have some sperm banked from my brother to try an IVF again at some point. And if that's the route that we choose, or if we decide not to and just have them dispose of it, um, that we could, make that call at some point. But for me, the child doesn't need to have that same DNA structure for me. I know now, for me to be considered that they're not just a parent, but their father, right? To be their dad. I don't need to have that same thing. There's a shirt that my wife got me, um, and it just says an ordinary demi dad. It's a play off of Maui from Moana, right? And that I am a demi dad, right? I am that adoptee parent. I am that foster parent, and that halfway, right? Um, and and part of me is like that, I know it doesn't make me any more special than a bio parent, but in some aspects, I think it does. Um, that there's a different, more unique side of me. Um, and so that this is just to know that, like, even though you're different, you're just as important as a bio parent, even as a demi dad. Or another one that she got that says Dadalorian, right? This is the way, that you are. I was going to wear that one for this, but I couldn't find it. But that that's somebody that you could be like, yeah, I am just like the Mandalorian, right? I don't have any kids of my own, but I did adopt this youngling, right? This other individual to be like my child. And how much, care goes into, Grogu, right? How, upset does the Mandalorian find himself when he loses Grogu, or how, like, painstaking does he, like, he's like, I need to get that kid back, right? Or I need to, you know, put him with his own people, right? Um, this is what I need to do, right? This is what needs to happen. And and just finding those different connections um within society, within personal life, um, helps build on it. Helps me to know, like, yeah, I'm doing what's right. I'm doing, you know, everything I can as a father. Having a permanent, child in the home is different. Instead of like, oh, okay, now you go live with your parents now, and now we're empty nesters again, and like we can just, go off and do whatever. There's some fun aspects to that too. But being able to share those fun aspects now with a child definitely makes it a little more fun, right? Changes what we're doing.
So I'm kind of curious, and you led perfectly up to that. The what was the once, let's see, how do I ask? Once the adoption, once you got that call to adopt this little girl, and all the legal paperwork and all of that stuff, once it was finalized, what did that feel like, of knowing that like this little girl is not going to leave the home? Like no one's going to call, there's not going to be a phone call one day that says, hey, you got to hand her back, that
Right.
she's a part of your family. Like what was that feeling like for you?
uh Euphoric is the best way to describe it, right? um Going and meeting her at this home and then leaving was like, that's my little girl, right? Like meeting her, I knew like we connected, and I knew, I turned to my wife and said, I don't care what you say, like we're adopting that little girl, right? Like you call our case manager up, our family specialist up, and you let her know we need to adopt this little girl, because that connection was there. And then having all that paperwork finalized, and having that moment, even though it was um during uh pandemic times, we weren't able to go in and have a photograph with the judge, or do any of those things. Even though it was during that time, it was still just as special. It was still, she's yours, wow, like so happy, and and so much fun. And um she's a daddy's girl. She, is upset when she doesn't get to say goodbye to me in the morning when I go to work, or check with me like, hey, grown-ups come back, right? Daniel Tiger has this song of like, grown-ups come back, right? Like, you know and she's, give me a hug and a kiss goodbye, and is happy when I come home. She hears that, you know alarm go off when the door opens, and she's like, dad, and runs to give me a hug. Like, those are the things that I dreamt of having, right? And I have it with her, and she's not related to me in a sense of, she came from my brother's sperm, or that's my wife's egg or whatever, but she is my daughter. And it's wonderful, in every aspect of it.
Oh man, I don't even know what to ask next. I mean, you've
you know
literally, I mean, it's incredible to listen to. There's the thing about this podcast, and sharing with our community about, keeping this specific towards fertility. There's so many, your ADHD is like, oh my God, there's this path that we can go down. There's this path that we can go down. And we could talk for 20 hours about
Yeah.
each little different thing. And I think keeping this related to fertility is like, you're continuing to foster as you have this daughter. So you didn't like, you're not done yet, I guess. Do you have?
Right. Yeah. So we did, after we adopted her, we did take in our uh we still had a foster placement with us after we adopted her. That was in the reunification process of going home, and then in February she went home. And after she went home, we took not quite a year. I think it was like 11 months off, in which we didn't have any foster placements, or we didn't. There's a thing called respite care, which is where and we've done that too, of where you have kids come into your home for a short period of time because the family needs to go on vacation, or they need to take a break, and this kid is still reunifying, so they need to have visits with their family, or there's other reasons, they just need a break from everything. So, these kids are going to go to grandparents, and then this kid's going to go stay with this other family for a little bit, and just have a break. And so we've done, respite care also. But we needed that time to be like, hey, this is our child. We need her to feel this love. We need to build this time with her. And we need to be able to just focus on her, right? And then, in December last year, we opened our home again, and to foster care again, and we're placed with a baby that we've had in our home for a year now. But she was ready for another kid in the house. She, was very much so like, I want a baby sister, or I want a sister in my home, that I can play with and that I can, enjoy time with. And so my wife's like, can we go just a little bit longer? Could we do this? And I was like, well, let's leave it up to her, right? Like, let's leave it up to her. We both could go, a couple more months without another kid in the home, and just have this time with her. But let's leave it up to her and see what she says and tells our worker. And so sitting down, and the worker goes, oh, so, would you like to have more children in the home? And she was like, yes, this is what I want, And so, it was like, okay, like this is what's up. But
how old was she?
She was, she was 3. So she came into our home at 18 months. And then we adopted her just after she had turned 2. It was actually, we adopted her on Biden's inauguration day. So that's one way. That's the only way I can remember the day of his inauguration is when we finalized our adoption. So January 21st. And so she had just turned 2, and so then last year in December, she was like, yeah, like, I'd like another kid in the home. And she has friends that, we have neighborhood friends that are just a couple houses down from us that are the same age. And she, but she wanted another kid in the home to play with and stuff. And so that case is doing its case thing. But yeah, she's great, and she loves on this baby and on this, toddler now, and is a part of the foster care process too. So, it's not just my wife and I now bringing kids into the home, but now it's my wife, my daughter, and I that are this family unit that are helping kids in the home too. So
your daughter knows about being adopted and adoption, and kind of you're not raising her with hiding that from her, or
no, and that's very important. That's something that, in talking with other adult adoptees, and in talking with other families that have adopted, that we need to be very open to her. As much as I would hope a parent would be open to their son with Klinefelter syndrome, that they, let them know, like, yes, you have Klinefelter syndrome. Yes, this is what it is. There are other people that have it, and this is how we talk to those people who have it, right? So she very much so knows that she has a bio mom, and this was her bio mom's name, and that her bio mom was unable to take care of her and keep her safe. And so she had to go and live with her other mom and dad and family, and they were able to keep her safe and take care of her and raise her until they weren't able to anymore because of certain situations in that home. And so then they said, we know this family that she would be able to learn and grow from, and which was us, and that, that we would keep her forever and help her learn and grow. And so she knows her adoption story, and that's very important for her to know. And it's very important for adoptees to know where they came from and what that situation is. And we always look for information on her bio mom. It would be really great to meet her bio mom and for us to find out that connection, because there's, or to find that family, because there's medical information that's important to know, right? We don't know any of her family medical history. And so we're shooting in the dark with that, like I was growing up. We didn't know I had Klinefelter syndrome. And so there's, medical things that go along with that, or other diagnoses that would be helpful to know. I didn't find out officially that I had ADHD until I was an adult working in the special education field, right? Like going to college and learning about ADHD, it was like, it's me, I have that. I'm the problem, it's me, right? Like that's definitely what this is. But that, getting that diagnosis, that helps with a lot of things. That let me see, okay, here's my map of my executive dysfunction. Where do I need to help myself? Who can I rely upon to give me this help at work, and remind me about things?
So I'm glad that, I have technology to help me with those executive function factors, right? Just as I'm glad to have this help, I, let people know about it, right? I talk about it and I discuss those things of what helps me and what gets on. If I don't talk about those things that help me, then others can't know what it is that I need, right? It's just the same with my daughter. If I don't talk to her and I don't discuss where she came from or what her story is, then how am I going to know, is she going to talk to me about things that she needs? Is your son going to talk to you about things that he needs with Klinefelters, or how he's feeling? What paths are you going to take to help your son through these things? How are we going to let others know about infertility? Well, Ryan, you're doing these videos, you're talking with guys about what's happening or what they've done. And all of those things help build the community, just as I'm helping build my community through foster care and through those parts to it. It's all related, even if we don't think it is. There's connection with all of it.
So kind of moving, like, now that you're a dad and you've gone through this whole process the last 10 years, it'll be almost 10 years.
Yeah. Next year will be 10 years
since your diagnosis. So what would you say to the guys that are out there that have listened to this podcast about your journey, and what would you say to like the newly diagnosed mothers in utero, about, but more so the guys that, are experiencing the infertility? What would you tell them about your journey and like about them to help themselves through this process?
It's more that you find yourself, right? Find where you are in the process, right? So if, for me, it took me a while to decide if I was going to close the door on micro-tease. That's something that now, and we know, we can go into that another time, but that's available for everybody, that, you may or you may not have, viable sperm and be able to have a kid through that process. That fertility process has become more available for other individuals besides those that, oh, dad has sperm, but mom is having issues, and so that's what the IVF process is for. No, the IVF process, that IUI process, is for us as well. We just have an extra step that we have to go through, right? So if that door is not closed for you, pursue that door, pursue that micro-tease option. if that's closed for you and you want to go with adoption, then there are many methods of adoption that you can do. Just know that there's other things that come with adoption. There's other levels of trauma that come with adoption. Just because I adopted this little girl doesn't mean that she doesn't have trauma that that comes with her, right? There's a family that lost out on adopting her and that have to go through a grieving process. Her bio mom doesn't have her. There's a grieving process that has to be done there too. There's a lot of different things that have to be considered and that you have to take into consideration. But as a whole, do I have a little girl now? Do I have, a family? Sure. Did I have a family before? Yes. Was it different than, what we think a family is? Yeah, it's different than anybody thinks what family is. But can you do it? Yes. Should you consider foster care? By all means, yes. As a foster parent, can tell you to consider it, because there are kids out there who, are wards of the state, have all of their ties from their families severed, and need a loving and caring family to go to. And there is that process of doing it. Is there baggage that they come with? Sure. Can we as Klinefelter's men help them through that process? Yeah, I think we can. I think that if you were diagnosed at a younger age and you just know, and there's things that you've had to go through and process, that you could help young man with other trauma. Yeah, you could help somebody through that process. And if foster care is not for you, consider mentoring too. That's another process of foster care, is that you could just become a mentor to a child that's in the system. You can help them learn how to find a job. You can help them with their schoolwork. You can, help them. You can become an advocate for them if they have an IEP, and, show up to their IEP meetings and help them, gain better educational services. Those are things that are available and that are out there to help you fill that void, or to help you process that void as well.
Well said, man. It's been incredible to share your experience and have, I think acceptance is the ultimate thing with Klinefelter syndrome. And it's for the mothers that are being diagnosed in utero, it's accepting the fact that your son's going to have this and having your baby, and not terminating him based on the odds that are out there. And then transferring that acceptance to the child. Exactly the metaphor that you used with telling your daughter at 3 or 2 about she's adopted and giving her age appropriate information is exactly like our community. And I hope the mothers and the families and the people that are out there that are listening to this, that they really pay attention to that. That's just one piece of extremely helpful information. So it's been incredible just to share your story, and I appreciate it. And we're going to be hearing more from Jared in the future. He is a special education teacher, and so we'll tackle that. But it's been incredible having you on, and thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Well, man, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.